The playoffs are upon us. Let's talk some hockey. And I'm going to jump right into this. The bracket you see on screen right now is obviously not the real bracket. This is from my predictions video from last October. And needless to say, I was wrong in many ways, but I want to discuss why before we get to the actual bracket and my playoff predictions now that everything has been finalized. So you look at the Eastern Lottery teams. I would say that really you have Detroit, Buffalo, Carolina, New Jersey, and Philly all in the same category. The Flyers could have easily made the playoffs. They're a solid team. I don't really have too much else to say aside from the fact that their goaltending, of course, was pretty damn well atrocious for most of the season. If they can get that figured out, they should be right back in contention sooner rather than later. New Jersey, a little bit worse than I expected them to be. I said in that video that Corey Schneider might have a chance of dragging that team into the playoffs. Didn't happen, and I feel sorry for Taylor Hall. Carolina, again, they're not too far off, and they had some players really emerge this year. Obviously, Sebastian Aho, Slavin did fairly well for them, so they could be right back in contention. Whether or not they'll be in Carolina to see that success, who knows. Buffalo, if they had Jack Eichel all year, I think they would have made it. Especially if he was able to play like he did once he came back from injury. I thought Robin Lehner was going to be the issue. He had a pretty strong season. Buffalo's not too far off from contention. And Detroit, I predicted that they wouldn't make the playoffs. I predicted that they'd be pretty bad. They're not too far off from contention. Yeah, they have a few things that they need to sort out. But at the very least, they ended their season on a very strong note, getting the win over New Jersey in the last game at Joe Louis Arena. Riley Sheahan, 2 goals, his only 2 goals of the season, including the GWG, and the last goal that will be scored in that building. A strong send-off, and at least they can head into the offseason on a bright note. Obviously, it sucks for them. The streak ended, and it's been rough in other ways. The passing of Gordie Howe and Mr. I, as they love to call him, Mike Ilitch. It was nice to see that season end on a positive note. And then you have the 3 colossal screw-ups. The Columbus Blue Jackets, Ottawa Senators, and Toronto Maple Leafs. With Toronto, I still thought they were a year or 2 away, as did most Leaf fans. At least another year. I didn't have too much faith in Frederik Andersen behind that defense, and I didn't think the rookie core would be as good as they are. Sue me for those assumptions. You probably had them too. But yeah, congrats to them for making the playoffs. We'll get into what they're up against in a little bit. The Ottawa Senators. I underrated them. Flat out. I underrated them. They are still a team led by Erik Karlsson. Craig Anderson, when he was able to play, was pretty damn good, no doubt about that. And then Guy Boucher. He's turned that team into a carbon copy of the mid to late 90s Devils. The boring, shut you down, watching paint dry style of hockey. But regardless, it's gotten results. The Sens are back in the playoffs, so congrats there. And then the Blue Jackets, you can't blame me. You just can't. Sergei Bobrovsky returns to form after having a dreadful prior season, including getting his coach Todd Richards fired very early on. Then you had John Tortorella, who everyone expected to be fired by American Thanksgiving at the latest, especially after the World Cup debacle. He hangs around, and they have a great season. Now, whether or not they can finally find some playoff success, who knows, but they've at least made it, and they had one hell of a year. Getting to the actual bracket side of the Eastern Conference, again, you can't blame me for the Tampa Bay Lightning. You can't. Injuries devastated that team. Ben Bishop underperforming, not having Steven Stamkos. The bright side is, while they may have to let go of a solid player because of the contracts they have coming up, they're still going to be contenders, especially if Andrei Vasilevsky can really take control of the crease. Obviously, too, Steve Yzerman did a wonderful job of managing that team, getting rid of Filppula, Boyle, and Ben Bishop. With the Vegas draft, the expansion draft coming up, the Lightning are still in a strong spot. Obviously, You could say the Cup window, you know, this was one of the years in that window, so it's going to be disappointing from that standpoint, but it's forgivable with the amount of injuries. Then you had the Bruins. They actually made it. I can't sit here and act like I was 100% confident in that. I absolutely wasn't. A few weeks ago, when they had lost, 4 or 5 in a row, I thought it was over. And my Twitter timeline proves that. I thought it was over. So glad to have been proven wrong. Very thankful that Brad Marchand's actually going to get to see the playoffs, although arguably he shouldn't. But, again, we'll get into that in a little bit. The Florida Panthers. I don't think you can blame me for predicting that they were going to make the playoffs. You know, just devastated. Devastated by injuries. Gerard Gallant gets let go. Very disappointing season for the Panthers, but they, of course, will be back, aside from Yager and maybe Luongo. Who knows how much longer he has left. That core is still young, and then you got Demers and Yandel locked up long-term. They're still going to be contenders. Montreal, despite, you know, the turmoil of coming into this year, no PK Subban. Michel Therrien gets let go and is replaced by Claude Julien. A circus of a season. They still win the Atlantic Division. Not surprised to see them make the playoffs. Of course, I said that they wouldn't finish in first, but, you know. Then you had the Pittsburgh Penguins. I mean, it's a lock. It was a guarantee that they were going to make it. The New York Islanders. Incredibly disappointing season. Obviously, towards the end, they started to pick it up. Greiss figured out that, oh, I want to be the starting goalie of this team. They call up Josh Ho-Sang, who, I mean, yeah, he's arrived. He is a player for that team in the future. But then the John Tavares injury. Disappointing season for them. Would have been nice if Andrew Ladd had gotten the offense going a little bit sooner, but it is what it is, and they'll be back in contention next year. Whether or not Garth Snow gets fired, who knows, but that'll be an interesting development to watch. And then you have the Caps and the Rangers, both locks, so I'm not going to spend too much time on them. Over in the West, Vancouver, again, not a, you know, shocking pick, pretty easy to make, although the emergence of Bo Horvat has certainly given them even more hope for the future. And then you had the Burrows trade, which, yes, I know Ottawa made the playoffs, and Burrows did particularly well against the Bruins, but still, I mean, Jim Benning smartening up a little bit, making some good deals. The Anaheim Ducks, boy was I wrong, as they win the Pacific Division title for, what, the 5th year in a row, I believe? I didn't have any faith in Randy Carlyle. I thought for sure they were going to plummet. They proved me wrong, and that hunger from veterans like Getzlaf, like Perry, and the emergence of Ricard Raquel, what, 33 goals, I believe, in the regular season? They are right there, and I was totally wrong on that. Speaking of totally wrong, the Edmonton Oilers. I doubted that Connor McDavid could drag that team to the playoffs. He did. He did. Now, of course, Cam Talbot was decent, and I definitely underrated him heading into the year. But the Edmonton Oilers are back in the playoffs. It's a good thing for everyone, for the fans, for the league. It's going to be exciting to see McDavid in the playoffs. The Arizona Coyotes, again, a disappointing year. You know, you had some injuries, mainly the Max Domi. That's all that can be said, a disappointing year for them. Same for the Winnipeg Jets, just decimated by injuries. Whether or not Connor Hellebuck, you know, is really the guy for them in the future, we'll find out. But, yeah, disappointing for them for sure. And then the Minnesota Wild. The Minnesota Wild, who I thought would just miss out because of the strong performances of certain other teams. I picked the Colorado Avalanche over the Minnesota Wild. That happened. Now, of course, Minnesota, great year. Devin Dubnyk, spectacular. And it'll be interesting to see what they can do in the playoffs. Speaking of the Avs, though, I might as well talk about them. Nobody thought they'd be that bad. Nobody thought they'd be that bad. One of the worst teams in the past 2 decades plus. Absolutely abysmal, and I am so sorry to every Avs fan that had to sit through that this season. On the bright side, Nolan Patrick, Nico Hischier on their way, unless you get completely screwed over by the draft lottery. Who knows, maybe Edmonton will find a way to win the lottery again, am I right? But Chicago was a guarantee. St. Louis pretty much a guarantee. Nashville, 8th seed, not a guarantee, but I was right on the money with that. San Jose makes it. Very disappointing year for Dallas. A lot of injury trouble, and of course the goaltending was abysmal. LA, I feel like they would have made the playoffs if a certain Jonathan Quick hadn't been hurt in the first game of the year. Peter Budaj, of course, wasn't a bad stand-in. But it's a very different team, a very different situation when you compare having Peter Budaj to a healthy Jonathan Quick. And while I don't think Quick would have played, you know, at like 2010, or not 2010, but 2012 levels, still, he is one of the better goaltenders in the league. And then you have Calgary. Despite the scare early on due to the horrible goaltending from Brian Elliott, they made it, and of course, they will be a dangerous team. But in the end, I predicted Tampa over St. Louis in the Stanley Cup final. Yeah, that's not happening. That's not happening. But I wanted to talk about that really quick. Let's get into the actual playoff bracket. Let's do this. And I'm going to start over in the Western Conference. The number 1 seed, Chicago Blackhawks, against the 8th seed, the Nashville Predators. Chicago did it again. That is what they do. Yet they have that strong core, and then it's the players around them. And they really stepped up this year, whether it was Hinostroza, Mott, Schmaltz. That's what Chicago does, man. They find these guys, these role players, to step up and do their... It might as well be the Patriots saying, do your job. And they've done just that. They're the number 1 seed. And despite Nashville having a chance, you know, it is going to be exciting to have Forsberg, Johansson, Victor Arvidsson, who had a great year. It's going to be exciting to see them in the playoffs. It's going to be exciting to see PK Subban in the playoffs. But I don't know. I'd love to see what I would consider the upset. And maybe it wouldn't be like a drastic upset. It wouldn't be like an NCAA 16 beating the 1 seed. But I could see Nashville winning this series. I am going to go with the Blackhawks, though, in 6 games. I won't shed a tear, though, to see the Predators move on. Second matchup, Minnesota and St. Louis. I, of course, had no way to predict that Jake Allen would struggle the way he did heading in to this season. And, of course, you factor in trading Kevin Shattenkirk. They just recently brought back Vladimir Sobotka. I don't know what to expect from the Blues. And, obviously, the Minnesota Wild in a very good spot. Devin Dubnyk, what can he do? Bruce Boudreau, one of the best coaches in the game. I'll say this. There isn't a single series lined up right now that I'm not excited to watch. This is going to be a fucking spectacular first round. But when it comes to Minnesota and St. Louis, they were my pick, but they're not my pick now. I'm going to go with Minnesota in 7. I think the Blues are going to fall just short. And that sucks to say, but I have to go with my gut. And speaking of going with my gut, we have the Anaheim Ducks against the Calgary Flames. And, I mean, I don't need to sit here and hype up what the Calgary Flames are capable of. You saw the winning streak that they had this year. I'm looking forward to seeing Matthew Tkachuk and Corey Perry try to outpest one another. That's going to be very interesting. But, again, I have to go with my gut. I'm going to say Anaheim in 6. And that's a shame. That the bottom half of that bracket, the potential is amazing, because you could have Anaheim, San Jose. You could have the Battle of Alberta, which would be great. But, again, I'd love to see the Battle of Alberta. I don't think we're getting it. I think we're getting Anaheim over Calgary in 7. And the bottom half, Edmonton and San Jose, despite Edmonton playing fairly well at home, and obviously it's exciting for Connor McDavid to be in the playoffs. Like I said, it's good for everybody, but I don't think it's going to last too long. I don't, and I think the veterans in San Jose are going to be able to get the job done, and I'm actually going to say that that series ends in 5 games. And that might piss a lot of people off, but I'm going to go with Anaheim over Calgary in 7, San Jose over Edmonton in 5. I don't think the Sharks' window is closed just yet. They are ready to make another run. And before moving on to the East, I'm actually just going to finish the West side of the bracket. So, of course, Chicago and Minnesota, a complete toss-up yet again, as most of these series are. And I'm just going to go with the favorite. I'm going to pick Chicago in 6 games. I think the Blackhawks will return to the Western Conference Final. Again, I will not shed a tear to see the Minnesota Wild advance, but I think the Hawks have it, man. I think they do. And then we have Anaheim and San Jose. again, a complete toss-up. If it was the battle, any combination, Battle of Alberta, Calgary, San Jose, it doesn't matter. It's a toss-up. I'm going to go, man, it's so tough. Because 2 years ago, I picked Anaheim to make it to the final, and obviously that fell short. I'd love to see San Jose get another crack at it. You know, Joe Thornton, Patrick Marleau. But I think that desire and that hungry feeling from the veterans in Anaheim, particularly Getzlaf and Perry, they are finally going to will that team to the Western Conference Final. I'm picking Anaheim in 6 over the Sharks, which means we have a Chicago-Anaheim Western Conference Final, the 2 #1 seeds. So very unlikely it will pan out this way. But again, it's just a prediction video. It's all meant for good fun. But this part isn't fun. I'm gonna say the Blackhawks take it over the Ducks. God damn it! I'm gonna say Chicago over Anaheim in 7. I think that series would go 7, and I think the Chicago Blackhawks are moving on and are returning to the Stanley Cup final. God, that pains me to say, but I think it's exactly what we are going to see. So we have Chicago in the final from the West. Let's talk the Eastern Conference. Montreal and the New York Rangers. Flat out, I'm saying Rangers in 6. And I'm not saying this because I'm a Bruins fan that's biased against Montreal. I said when Claude Julien was traded, if he were to win the Cup this year with Montreal, I would die laughing. It would be hilarious. And I'm not even saying that in a sarcastic way. I'm that big a fan of Claude Julien. I'm still not necessarily happy that he was let go, as I do feel like it was more the player's fault. But again, the coach is the heat shield. He's always the first one to go. It's the Metro, man. It is the Metro. In any other, I think in any other division, you know, the Rangers would have been at least vying for that #1 spot. I can't help it. Despite some of the Rangers' struggles at home, too, I am going to have to go with the Rangers over the Habs in 7. I think that'll go 7. Actually, did I already say 6? I don't even know. I'm going to say 7 now. This is what happens when you one-take a video like this. I'm going to say Rangers in 7 over the Habs. Now, as much as I'd actually like to see a Montreal versus Ottawa series or a Montreal-Boston series, I don't think we're getting either of those. I think we are getting a Rangers-Sens matchup in round 2. The Sens, my heart says Sens in 6. My heart says I want the Bruins to win, but it's not going to happen. I want to say the Bruins are going to be able to take 2 games. I don't think they are. I think this series ends in 5 games and the Sens move on. The Bruins lost the season series and they never look good. And like I said, Guy Boucher plays that style. The Bruins haven't had an answer for it this year. And I don't think they're going to have an answer for it now, especially with Ottawa having home ice advantage. The Sens move on in 5 games. And then you have the, I'm glad the Bruins avoided the Caps, but regardless, I think it would have, either series, Bruins, Sens, Bruins, Caps, wouldn't have gone more than 5 games. And I don't think this series is going to go more than 5 games. I was very, very tempted to say that we're about to have a Winnipeg situation on our hands, and sorry, Jets fans, but I do think the Leafs will take at least 1 game over the Caps, but that is all they will take. Washington over Toronto in 5. And then the final matchup, Pittsburgh and Columbus. The Blue Jackets have a chance, flat out. They have a chance. This could be their first series win in franchise history, but even with the loss of Chris Letang, I think the Penguins are going to be just a bit too much. The Jackets, you know, somewhat, I'm trying to be nice about it, but they're not on the hottest of streaks heading in to the playoffs. I think they've gotten cold at the worst possible time, and I'm going to take the Pittsburgh Penguins in 6 games. So at the top half of the bracket, we have the Rangers and the Sens. Simply put, I am taking the New York Rangers in 6 games. I don't have too much to say about this particular series, but the next series, Washington and Pittsburgh. This is where I think the injury to Chris Letang will cost the Penguins, and I think it is finally the year, despite the fact that on my predictions bracket, I said Pittsburgh over Washington. I think this time out, the Pittsburgh Penguins will fall just short. The Caps will finally get out of the second round, and I think they're going to do it in 6 games. So your Eastern Conference Final, the New York Rangers and the Washington Capitals. And I'm going to take the favorite pick here. I'm going to go with the Washington Capitals in 6 games over the New York Rangers. I think this is finally the year. They are finally going to do it. The Caps are going to make it. Despite, I mean, that's the thing too. You got to figure. You get past Pittsburgh, you get past the Rangers, and you finally make the Stanley Cup final. Might not be the, might not be the most likely thing to happen, but that would be a hell of a story to get past 2 roadblocks that you have struggled to overcome in the playoffs. I do think we are going to have a showdown between the Blackhawks and the Washington Capitals. I mean, man, I want this series so bad. I do. Ovechkin versus Kane, Taves versus Backstrom, Holtby versus Crawford. What a series this would be. But in saying that, I'm taking the Blackhawks in 6 games. And that pains me to say. But I think the Chicago Blackhawks will win another one. And again, if they lose in the first round to Nashville, I won't be surprised. But looking at it, I think the Hawks take it. I think their team, once again, they just have that perfect mix, that high-end talent. I just think it's their year. Their defense, of course, is looking pretty damn strong on paper. Whether or not they perform up to that level, who knows? But simply put, I'm taking the Chicago Blackhawks in 6 games over the Washington Capitals, and Chicago wins again. I just died a little bit inside. Guys, that is it. That is it for my video, but I will say, let me know down in the comments below how you think this postseason will pan out. I want to know your predictions. Feel free. You can just tell me who you think is going to win the Cup and why. You can tell me, series by series, as I broke it down here, who you think will win and why. Let me know down in the comments below who is your pick, who is taking home the Stanley Cup this year. And for now, guys, I will leave you with this. And once again, thanking you for your support. As always, it is very much appreciated. Really looking forward to your responses. And until next time, guys, take it easy. I don't know how to finish this video, so I'll just say goodbye.